Hello and welcome to this video tutorial. My name is Blackjack Johnny and today we're going to be taking a look at trenches. Someone put in a request for this tutorial, so here we go. There's so many different ways to create trenches. It really depends on what you're building, but in this particular case we're going to be taking a look at how to do it using terrain patches, and this is more of a World War II style type trench arrangement. But like I say, there are plenty of different ways to go about doing this, but hopefully by using terrain patches we can set these up in a way that's really going to help us for all sorts of different styles of trenches. So let's take a quick look at this example. Obviously we've got our trench walls here, and we've got some nice blending going on between those just to bring it all together, and then of course we've got some more blending up here and down here. And really this tutorial is as much about being able to set up our terrain for this type of texture work, and hopefully this will translate over to other types of terrain work as well. So that's enough blathering. Let's get on with it. So let's move over to a little bit of empty space and get started on building. And where do we start? Well, that really depends on where you're at with what you're building, but the first thing we need to do is draw out a brush that's going to represent our trench walls, for example. This is where I'm going to start, at least. And at this point I'm going to worry about gameplay standards, because I want this trench to have what's called a standing cover height. And what that means is the player is going to be able to shoot over the top in a standing position but take cover in a crouching or prone position. And we can use gameplay standards to help us with this. And if you're not familiar with gameplay standards, let me first explain what they are. They are a set of dimensions that allow us to build our geometry for certain types of gameplay, and as we've just discussed, in this case we want our player to be able to shoot over the top but take cover. Where can we find these gameplay standards? Well, if we take a look at this web page, you can see it's the Mappers United Wiki. If you want to visit this page, you can visit it at wiki.modsrepository.com. You can find links all over the Call of Duty community, specifically mappersunited.com. And if you're just starting out with mapping, this is going to be your #1 place to visit for everything mapping and modding. And it supports technical information, tutorials, and all sorts of assets for all different versions of Call of Duty. And in this case, we're looking at gameplay standards. I'm using the Call of Duty 5 version of Radiant, or World at War. And they do vary. If you're using older versions, they may vary, so you'll have to find the specific gameplay standards for your version. But in this case, I want to look for standing cover height, which I already know as 48 units. So that's the gameplay standards. You can find this list for all sorts of things. Very handy, very useful, very necessary. But anyway, let's get back to our trenches. So we've got our brush drawn out. It's to our gameplay standard measurements. Now we need to turn this into a terrain patch. So I'm going to switch into my side view here. This gives me the angle of this brush that I want to create the terrain patch on. So come up to patch, simple terrain. I'm going to put a few verts into this, but I'm not going to go mental. For height, I'm going to leave it at 2. We'll add some more in there later. But for width, I'm going to give ourselves 5 to play with. I'll click OK. We've got our terrain patch there. Let's switch back into our top view. I'm just going to add a little bit of a curve into this, or a little bit of shape to it. So press V on your keyboard to bring up your verts. Left click drag over this row or column. Press and hold Alt and just left click drag, and we can just move that around. I'm just going to put a little bit of character into this. Obviously you'll take your time and you build whatever you want to build. With that done, I'm just going to save myself a bit of time and take a copy of that, and I'm just going to move it over. And the width of your trench here, you need it to be wide enough for at least 2 players to be able to pass down here. You don't want it to be too tight. There's probably a gameplay standard for it, but that's probably about there. So you're going to want to invert this patch by pressing Control I, and there we go, that flips it around to there. So that's our 2 main walls done. Next we need to create a new terrain patch for our ground, and all I've done is just drawn out another brush level with our bottom there. Come up to patch, simple terrain, And at this point I'm going to, for height, I'm going to add 5. That'll mean there's the exact same amount of verts on our ground patch as there is on our trench walls here, so we can do some welding. When you're welding, of course, the first patch you select is your destination patch, which means that the verts on our ground patch here will shift over to here. If we do it the other way around, of course, our walls will come over to our ground patch, and that's not what we want. So wall first, ground patch second. Press V on your keyboard to bring up the verts. Drag out and select 2 verts, press W to weld. Make sure we do that all the way along. This is important at this stage because we're going to be doing some blending, so we need these patches to be welded together and in the same position so we can do some blending. Let's do the same on this side. Let's weld this up. And there we go. Now we can throw a new texture on there. And that's our ground in place. Next we need to add some terrain in around the top here. Very much the same process as our ground. I've already done this side just to save ourselves a little bit of time. And then we're just going to come in and do exactly the same as we did on the other side. Just weld all these up, because again we're going to be doing some blending up here. So with that done, we're now ready to add some more vertex columns into our terrain patches for the purpose of blending and of course manipulation. So let's go ahead and do that now. So we're almost ready to do some blending, but first of all we need to know how to add and remove vertex columns from our terrain patches. So if you're not aware of how to do that, let's cover that now. I've got my terrain patch selected and I've pressed V to bring up my verts, and to add a new column all we need to do is drag out and select 2 verts and press Ctrl Shift A. That'll add a new vertex column in between those 2 selected verts. So let's do that again. Drag out and select 2 verts, Ctrl Shift A, and there we go. And it also works along the other way as well, of course. If I drag out and select these 2 verts, Ctrl Shift A. That's how we can add vertex columns, and this is absolutely vital for us when working with terrain. And the other vital step, of course, is knowing how to remove them. So if you add too many, or you need to get rid of some, or a column, just left click and first of all press and hold Shift, then left click on that vert or any other vert, and you can see it selected that entire column. Shift left click again and it will select the column along the opposite axis there. Once you have the right column selected, press Ctrl Shift Q. Bang, gone. Let's get rid of this one as well. Ctrl Shift Q. And there we go. That's how we can add and remove. That's going to be a vital step for the following stages of this build. So I've decided that I actually want some of this trench wood texture to come up onto this patch here, onto this particular axis or plane up here. And I could have done that in the early building stages, but it's not too late. No need to panic or rebuild anything. We're going to use our newfound knowledge of adding vert columns into terrain patches to our advantage. So we're going to do that now, and I'm going to add some vert columns towards the edge of this until I think I've got just about where I need. Let's remove any excess. I think, yeah, that's just about right. So I need to apply this wood texture to this patch, and as we know, a single terrain patch can only support or have one texture applied to it. So we need to split this particular piece of terrain away from this patch. So press V on your keyboard to bring up your verts, Shift left click to select the row that you want to split the patch along. In this case it's this one. And once you do, press Ctrl Shift X. That will split that piece of terrain away, and we can now apply our wood texture to it. And at this point, you may wish to align the textures or have a completely different texture up here, but I want to align them, and you're going to have a bit of an issue doing that. Or you can do it with 2 single separate patches, but it's much easier if they're one. So the next tip I'm going to give you is how to merge patches. And to do that, we need to have both the patches selected, and for this to work we have to follow a couple of simple rules. First of all, both patches must be welded along all of the length and breadth, and both patches must be the same density of verts. So with that done and both patches selected, press W, and you see the texture's gone all funky there because technically this is a new patch. So we need to sort this out. So let's try and do it the old way. And no, it's all gone messed up. It's not the same way it is at all. So I'm going to use this opportunity to give you another tip. This is a really great top tip, and it was brought to us by Paolo88, and it's really helped me out on several different occasions for many different types of texture work. And in this particular case, it's going to help us with applying a texture in the correct rotation. And by that I mean, if we take a look at the newly created patch, I hit natural, and this is what happened. It's not applying the patch in the correct manner that I wish it to, and we can tell this patch which way we want the texture to be applied. And what's going on here, just to explain it, if we, looking down in this top view, imagine that this is one single patch, obviously this would be the top, this would be the bottom, and these would be the two sides. But what's happening is when you apply texture to a patch, it applies it to which it thinks is the top edge. So to us, of course, that would mean this is the top edge. But in this particular case, it's applying it to the patch thinking that this edge is the top. And we need to tell this patch that no, we want the top to be along this edge. So what we need to do is, with the offending patch selected, press Ctrl Shift M. Doesn't look like anything happened, but if we bring up the Surface Inspector again and hit natural, bang, you can see now that it's applying the texture in the way that we want it. Of course, the other way to do it is simply rotate the texture using the Surface Inspector. Sometimes that'll work, sometimes it won't, but doing it this way will really help us, and saving time messing about too much trying to do it with the Surface Inspector. So whatever works with it, try everything, but I really wanted to give you that tip because it really helps us. So let's show it again just to make sure we know what we're doing. At the moment, this is the top edge. If we want to change it to this edge, you press Ctrl Shift M again. Let's hit natural. You can see that there it's applying the texture with the top along the edge. Ctrl Shift M again, and it's done it the opposite way. So you just hit Ctrl Shift M, it'll rotate it, or it'll change it, of course, to whichever edge you want it to be. Hit natural, bang, done. Brilliant tip. I hope that works out well for you. So now we're ready to do some blending, and what we could do, I want to blend this on the top here. So this dirt texture kind of overlaps, blends into this wood. So what are we going to do? We could select this patch and copy and paste the whole thing. But since we're only going to be blending on this top edge, we don't really need to have the whole patch. So let's split this top away again. So it's a single patch, and then Control C to copy, Control V to paste. And then I want to find the blend texture that corresponds with our other base texture over here, which is this one. I've already got my textures already loaded in. What you need to do to blend is select that edge, because I don't want any of this dirt texture along this one. And with that done, press G on your keyboard to bring up the Vertex tool. And to blend, we need to click Alpha, and with our amplitude bar, slide it all the way down to 0. You can see that texture's being blended out along that vertex column. A very accurate blending, which is why I'm doing it that way. If we just deselect now, make sure these textures are capped so we can line them up. Yep, and there we go. You see I've got a blend on the top of our wood there. Next step, we need to re-merge these wood patches. With that done, we've now got a little blend patch on the top here that we can change at our will. Let's continue on now and do some blending down here. You may or may not wish to do any blending down here, but I think it's nice to sort of tie these two patches together a little bit, so let's go ahead and do that. I need to add some more vertex columns into this patch first of all, because as we know, we need to place our vertex columns where we need them for blending or manipulation. That'll do me, I think, and at this point I'm going to split it away again. I'm going to do the same on our ground patch here, or our trench floor. Same again, split it away, and it'll become obvious why I'm doing that in just a second. But if you select those two newly created patches, press Ctrl C to copy, Ctrl V to paste, grab your blend texture, And let's blend those away along that edge. Same on the top here. So why did we split our patches up and set it up in this fashion? Simply put, it's all about texture alignment, and as we discovered up here earlier, texture alignment's a lot easier if we can work with one single patch at a time. So that's why we split these away. With our two blend patches selected, just press W to merge them, and then use the surface inspector to do whatever you wish. But if we just deselect now, we've got our blend patch in place, then we can change at our will, like we did up here. And the last stage, of course, is just to remerge your ground patch and your trench wall patch. Just keeps the number of patches reduced, but still allows us to add a blend. And from there, it's really just a matter of how much detail you want to put into it. If we come back over to our example map, you can see that I've actually laid in a new blend in there. And of course, we've manipulated the verts for give it that realistic look, and that's about it. That brings us to the end of this tutorial. I really hope you found it useful, and I hope you can make some really nice trenches now. Alright then, thanks for watching. From everyone at mappersunited.com, see you on the next one.